They've been fighting a recession for decades, keeping interest rates manipulated to zero. They have reasons why they changed the way they calculate inflation from a governmental level.
You need a lot of licenses to do anything.
They make decisions often just based on the dollar.
People are not self-sufficient in the city.
Do you want to be scared of everything? And the things we can control is decide where do we want, what do we value? How do we want to spend our time? What do we want to teach our kids? Where do we want to live? How do we want to, what environment, what culture do we want to live in? And
it's just hard to live in those places and not be on the hamster wheel.
The lifestyle here with all the things, considered, it allows you to be more present, to live in the moment.
You can't regulate morality into existence. When I'm looking for something, I gotta go through my network and find out who's the recommended people.
So if you do that, you build the relationships, you're part of the community, you can have faith.
That's part of the culture. I mean, that's what's so beautiful about it, and that's where the safety lies. Hello and welcome back to the Ecuador Insider Podcast. Jesse, Carl, Brandon, we've switched up the seating today. It's very exciting. I was advocated for this side of the room. Me and Brandon fought for a few minutes. He conceded this time, which is rare for Brandon.
Well, I agree that this episode should be Carl-centric.
Really?
So instead of Jesse-centric, like Carl's in this, just like the whole, heliocentric or Earth-centric debates that they have with the flat earthers. We have a Carl-centric podcast today.
I like it. I know he's well prepared for that.
Super prepared. Got my notes here.
All right, we're gonna touch on some crime stuff. We're gonna touch on some real estate questions. My battery is gonna run out. We may even touch on Bitcoin. We'll talk a little bit about Vilcabamba and what's going on here in the Valley, and like that. So let's jump right into it. Why don't we start with some of that economic stuff? Do you want to go there first?
I mean, maybe before we start there, we should. If you're watching the channel and you like our content, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. If you're not, we would really appreciate it. We appreciate the support. It helps us out. It helps get our content out to other people that might not see it, the more people that subscribe. And give us a thumbs up. If you like this show, watch it. Watch the rest of it. We have playlists that have tons of other information than we have in the past. We have chapters in most of the podcasts now, so you can go ahead and skip around to topics you may be interested in and avoid the ones you're not. So definitely give us a like, and we thank you for watching.
Yes,
and
thanks for watching.
While I'm getting back on camera here, charger in hand, did you see how seamless that was? While you were talking, anyways.
It was great. Well, hey!
Hey!
Well done.
April 12th is our next Vilcabamba lifestyle retreat. We've got about 9, 10, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Ooh, 11. Might be. Yeah, I mean, we're getting to the point where we have a few spots and then that's
a couple of spots left. Again, guys, this is a lot of fun. So come down, spend 9 days with us, stay in a beautiful hotel, learn everything you could ever want to know about life in the region, in Ecuador, all your questions answered, hands-on, first-hand experience, great food, lots of time with Carl. I know the ladies are going to like that.
Oh, boy.
And anyway, no, jokes aside.
Talking about the ladies, we want to celebrate and say Happy Women's Day.
International Women's Day, that's right.
International Women's Day, yeah.
Since
that was a few
we
days
made
ago?
a misogynist video about it and decided not to release it.
Did you do that?
I can't believe you did that.
I thought Brandon and you were the only ones in that video.
Right, yeah.
All right, Jesse. Well, the point of that really is that we've noticed with the Google algorithms and YouTube statistics that most of our viewers are actually men, but we do appreciate all of the ladies who watch our show, and we want to thank you and happy International Women's Day to you.
Because we know the truth anyway, that behind most of the men that are watching that are in a relationship with a woman, that they're often the better half, right? They're the power behind the throne, kind of, so to speak, in many cases. Because they're probably mandarinas like us, right? I mean,
behind every great man, there's a great woman.
You guys just have to continue to speak for yourselves on all the mandarina stuff.
Listen, we've gotten feedback from the YouTube comments, and the consensus is that you are the mandarina of the group. I'm just saying.
You look like the more mandarina.
Oh, all right.
It's probably the hat.
It might be the hat.
The hat and the weight as well.
I'm skinny, is what you're saying?
You're lighter. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
Lighter weight.
Oh, that's
So
funny.
I might be getting like beat up by my wife.
More likely. More likely.
Yeah. I see. So who's actually the biggest mandarina at the table, Carl?
Ooh.
You tell me. We should take a poll.
A poll.
Yes.
Let's pull each other. Is that what we're pulling?
All right, we can't go too
All
much
right,
longer
that's
on that,
enough.
although I would like to. So yeah, let's jump into some of this economic stuff. What?
Yeah. I saw the OMB, the White House OMB. The Office of Management and Budget. I forget what the acronym is. They released the budget. So the 2025 budget, and it's a couple things are interesting about it. So let me put my vision on here. So the budget for 2025 fiscal year is 7.3 trillion. Okay, so 7.3 trillion, and their budget office is projecting the U.S. national debt to hit 45 trillion in 10 years. We're currently nearly 35 trillion. So it doesn't take a math whiz to kind of understand, something doesn't make sense there, right? We're at 35 trillion. They're unveiling a 7.3 trillion deficit for 2025, and they're only projecting the U.S. debt to hit 45 trillion in a decade. So the math doesn't kind of work. And then even if you run rate the most recent spending, the current deficit projections, we're adding $1 trillion every 100 days. $1 trillion every 100 days. So I don't know. One of two things is happening here. Like, one, I dove into the projections, and they don't project a recessionary time ever. It's always just GDP growth, inflation maintenance or reduction. It's always just positive in the budgets. And this is nothing new for any of you guys that have dove into the budgets, the governmental budgets before. This is kind of par for the course anyway. But this one's a little more in-your-face blatant, with a $7.3 trillion budget proposal for 2025 and a current debt of 35 trillion, and then saying in 10 years we're only going to be at 45 trillion, when in reality we're adding $1 trillion every 100 days in the real time. So the only way that can really happen is, there's two ways probably. There's one way, it's dramatically slashing, three ways. It's probably a combination of slashing social projects, social, welfare type projects, and dramatically raising taxes. Or it's just wiping out a whole bunch of people. Like, there has to be a dramatic reduction in population. So, I don't know how you actually make a budget like that work, but the math definitely doesn't work. So I don't know what you guys think about that. 35 trillion, where we're at, 45 trillion in a decade, but they're projecting a 2025 7.3 trillion, and we're adding $1 trillion every 100 days. Doesn't,
Yeah,
it's like grade school math.
Like we've
The
talked.
Great Reset.
Right, exactly.
That's the only solution, is the Great Reset. Really.
It could be.
Right? What else?
It could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, currencies have debt-based currencies, debt-based monetary systems, but in this case, a particular currency, have lifespans.
Yeah.
Like, they have mathematical lifespans. That the U.S. dollar has gone much past what it should be able to because of Bretton Woods and because of the sort of inelastic demand that's built into the system.
Right.
For dollars, and yeah, we're kind of pushing up towards the limits of that.
Yeah. And it's right. We've been able to play the game longer than we should because of the relationship with the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve, and the shell game they play with the bond buying and the currency issuing and the bond buying and that made me look at the foreign debt holders. So this was updated as of October of 2023. So foreign owners of U.S. national debt. Who do you think is the largest? Carl's looking, so don't guess, Carl. Jesse? Who's the largest foreign owner of U.S. national debt as
So
of?
the Fed doesn't count in this case.
Right. Yeah, well played. Yeah, correct.
It has to be China.
China's number 2 at about 10% of the debt.
Okay. Japan.
Japan is number 1 at almost 15%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. I knew Japan was up there, but I thought China too.
Yeah.
And I thought they were way more than Japan. Like Japan is far and away the largest holder of foreign debt. And then United Kingdom comes in at 3 at about 9%. Luxembourg
Right.
at about 5%, and then the Cayman Islands at about 4%.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so interesting, right? So I don't, you know, when, so the ramifications of, I mean, let's go talk about China or Japan a little bit. Like Japan on the surface didn't make sense until I thought about it. Japan has had you know, economic controls in place where they've kept, you know, we had that phase here in the States where we kept interest rates at 0% after, you know, for what, 5-6 years in a row, like unnaturally low. Japan did that for decades, right?
Yeah.
So they've been fighting a recession for decades, keeping interest rates manipulated to 0. So it makes sense that they hold this type of, a ton of this type of debt, because the low return is better, you know, it's risk-free return in their percent. But if interest rates tick up in Japan to 1%, even 2%, all of a sudden it doesn't make sense for them to hold bonds like that anymore.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
oh, sorry.
No, that's kind of it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those things too happen. You know, those agreements are made at high levels. I don't know if that's part of sort of the post-World War II restructuring, where that was sort of
Right.
You know, obligatory.
You're
for
going to do this, yeah.
Japan to hold large amounts of
Yeah,
US
because the
debt.
list doesn't make sense. Luxembourg and Cayman Islands, like how are they?
Cayman Islands is an interesting one with all
right.
the, like, you know, the tax rules there and all that stuff.
You know what's interesting about Cayman Islands is that before we moved to Ecuador, before we came the first time, it was February of the COVID year. And we had a family trip. We were going to the Cayman Islands.
Oh, yeah?
And
You're talking 2020 or 2021?
2020.
Yeah.
And so this was just when, so we had the trip to the Cayman Islands. I forget the date. And the COVID stuff was just starting to percolate. Mm-hmm. And the day before we were leaving to go to the Cayman Islands, they released if you have a fever, you know, if you arrive to the Cayman Islands and you have a temperature, or you have to quarantine for 14 days, all these things, and you know, Bella and I woke up with a sniffly nose. I'm like, you got to be kidding me! Like, if we go all the way there, we can't. We're only staying for 10 days. You know, we can't quarantine for 14 days. So we ended up canceling that trip, and the blessing of that all was we stayed home. We spent that first month at home, and that was really the time that allowed us to really settle and dive into Ecuador and give us the confidence to make the move. So we probably wouldn't have come to Ecuador as soon if we would have done the Cayman Island trip. And
Interesting.
Yeah.
So did you have to take your suitcases of cash elsewhere?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, of course.
That was inconvenient.
Yeah, I know, that's tough, right? Yeah. I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do.
I wish you had brought some of those to Ecuador. You're a John Williams follower.
I have shadow stats, yeah.
Because that ties into some of this stuff. Do you have some thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
I mean, he's gone behind paywalls now. He used to publish a lot of stuff, you know, free, but the ideology behind it, or his theory, is that over time, government, you know, the political party in power, and they won't say this, they have reasons why they changed the way they calculate inflation from a governmental level in the United States, that they justify to the public. But, you know, his argument is that they've changed the way we calculate inflation periodically over time to support the political party in power, to make them, you know, to allow them to be reflected in better light to the public, to manipulate interest rate or inflation rates lower for lots of reasons, including, you know, the cost of living. The COLA increase is tied to, you know, the Social Security payments, so they keep that lower intentionally. And John Williams talks a lot about, John Williams and Chris Matthews, I don't recall. I'll have to look it up. But they talk, you know, they track the way inflation was calculated in the 70s, and then every major change of the calculation, they kind of track it, and then they try and reverse engineer from the current phase, the current way they calculate it, back to how it was calculated in the 70s to have like an apples to apples comparison. And it's hard. It's not simple because some of the data, they stop publishing some of the data in the same way, so it's not super clean and easy to do, but he does a thorough job of doing it. And I think the most recent is like inflation was like 7 to 8% higher than the current, I don't know what they're projecting, 2%, 2.9. I don't even recall what the most recent is, but it's like 7 to 10% higher than that if we would just measure it the way we measured it years ago,
sure,
with no other changes. And Peak Prosperity is the guy, is the YouTube channel. I forget his name now, but he goes through and he breaks down how they do the adjustments to inflation with hedonic adjustments and substitution adjustments. He has this whole great, I think it's free education course. We'll link to that below if you guys are interested in stuff on somebody that really breaks down the microeconomic behind the macro in a really easy to understand video format.
You were very close. Chris Martenson.
Martenson, there it is. Yeah. He's really good job teaching and explaining. I think he went to Duke. He's like a economist from Duke, and he covered the COVID stuff as well. But he does a really good job at, helping people understand why the numbers can be fuzzy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the shadow stats stuff is super interesting because, if we are in like low double digit or even higher real inflation, if that's actually what's taking place in the States, that's obviously outpacing salary increases dramatically.
Oh yeah.
And in the position that the U.S. is in, and many other countries of just this heavily regulated economy that's very, very complicated, has just enormous amounts of sort of efficiency, kind of, you could say, built in, which makes everything have to be perfect all the time,
right,
for it to work. And so you have extremely efficient supply chains, and you have things like chickens that are raised in Tennessee and shipped to China and returned to the U.S. for sale, and you've got, that's kind of like the level of complexity that the economy has.
So you can argue that that's not really efficient.
Well, it's absurd,
right?
But I mean, if it saves 3 cents,
right, it's
chicken,
all efficient, financially somehow,
efficient, right?
Which is crazy,
right? And the things that you rely on for your everyday life come from all over the world, and many, even one widget might have parts from 10 different places and be an assembled in an 11th place, and all that kind of stuff. At the same time that you've got restrictions on your life that sort of cause it makes creativity harder. You have you need a lot of licenses to do anything. You need a lot of permissions, a lot of training, a lot of licenses, there's a lot of steps between maybe something you want to do and your capacity to legally do so.
Yeah, I mean, you even see cases in cities where kids can't even go have a lemonade stand on the street because somebody throws a fit, and the cops are like, they don't want to do it, but they're like, they got to go stop the kids from selling lemonade because they don't have a permit. Like, come on.
Right. So yeah, it's just interesting. Like it's such a different environment to operate in, and when you put that in context of sort of some of the risks, like what we were talking about with the debt, with inflation, so on and so forth. Yeah, man, it's a place that I love. I love the people. I really actually have come to appreciate the U.S. culture in a certain way, having lived elsewhere now for so long. The efficiency. Not anybody who lives in Ecuador, when they get to go to a U.S. supermarket, it's like, oh, it's like your birthday. I mean, it's Christmas morning. There's a lot of stuff about the U.S. that's awesome, and when I say the U.S., I mean other places like it as well. But those differences in terms of the environment you're operating within are dramatic, and at least for me, in terms of quality of life, lifestyle, as well as just your sense of security.
Right.
I just feel a lot better in this environment where those things don't apply. We have a practically non-existent inflation. We have we went over the debt numbers. I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but very very modest per capita debt numbers, both on the consumer side and the national debt versus the U.S. and other developed, quote unquote, developed nations. As well as just a lack of complexity in the economy and, a lack of complexity in the supply chain, and just a sort of resourceful people who are used to like simple, easy ways of living and no winter and all that stuff. Like, it just makes me feel good to sort of be in this environment and not.
Totally. And the complexity in the U.S. supply chain and the efficiency as you described it from the financial aspect, that the supply chains are relatively robust, but they're very fragile in the sense that they make decisions often just based on the dollar. So it's like almost kind of the opposite of here, at least in the rural areas where time isn't money. Here, like, people are helpful, they're willing to go out of their way and spend their time with you and not expect you to they have something else to do because they're earning money that way. So the culture is much different from that perspective. And in the U.S., time is money. Like, that's the perception anyway. So then decisions are made that way, and it actually, as it creates more efficiencies from the financial performance of businesses, it actually creates fragility and then the concepts that they adopt in like their inventories, for example. Now, instead of having an inventory reserve for issues in supply chains, they now have a lot of companies use just-in-time inventory, which they don't have reserves. If something in this complex chain breaks or has an issue, it affects production from everybody because they don't carry the inventory on their books anymore. So then what happens is, then they have to pay exorbitant freight rates to get things overnighted if they can even do that. And we saw just after COVID when you're importing a lot of things, particularly from China, and they're coming on big boats. And if China wants to play games, they can hold shipping containers and not ship them on time, and then send a whole bunch at once and overload the ports. And there's only so many ports and so many the way the ports are the bottleneck in the States, they can only unload those at so many hours a day, so many per hour.
Rate, yeah.
So they can, as robust as the supply chain is, it can be it's kind of like a giant Rube Goldberg machine in a way where, something can go wrong really easily. And then that's felt throughout the retail markets, because it's the same concept when you take these big manufacturers of food or any goods in the States, and then you take those down to the consumer retail level. It's not like 7-Eleven or Walmart has 2 weeks worth of stock of food. They're getting shipments every day, and where they don't have these big facilities where they've got, a month worth of reserves or 3 weeks or 2 weeks. They've got a couple of days. That's it. So if something should break in this Rube Goldberg machine and cause things to delay a week, 2 weeks, that's when shelves start emptying at the retail level, and that messes with people's heads. And that's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we saw some of that during COVID, where you saw some of that delay at the retail level, and then you saw people making, perhaps irrational decisions, and they're going and stocking up on toilet paper, and all of a sudden they're putting limits on how many rolls of toilet paper you can buy and how many packages of chicken you can buy, because people were, the scarcity created people like, I need to go get mine, and they go get it, and that creates a bigger problem for the whole system. So yeah, it's interesting that the financial robustness creates an actual reality of fragility in the system, and it's the opposite here. The inefficiency and the simplicity creates a robust. It may be less profitable, from a financial perspective, but there's a robustness in the reality of the moving goods around the country and getting to the end user.
Yeah, and is any of that food in Walmart actually food? That's
Right.
another
What
question.
should we call it now? Foodstuffs?
Even that might be
Food
generous.
products?
Right,
Food-like?
Yeah, food-like products. I like that one.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, it's really interesting. It very much feels like we're at a time in the world where being self-sufficient is valuable.
Yeah.
And you've brought up a number of times on the pod, Brandon, like your attempts at self-sufficiency in a cold climate, where you were living at the time, and just not only how difficult it is, but it's not cost effective.
Yeah.
And it's like, most of this country is self-sufficient,
Yeah.
to a large degree. And, I think the U.S. was like that probably 70 years ago or something.
Yeah. In the rural areas,
At
for
least
sure.
yeah. And then here, too,
Same here,
people are
right.
not
Yep.
self-sufficient in the cities. But, but it's very conducive to that lifestyle if that's what you're looking for. And it seems like a good time, to be looking for that kind of thing, considering some of those risks that we're talking about. I mean, what could go wrong, right?
Right.
And, we saw a little sort of preview of that in 2020, where there was some supply chain issues and a lot of things got more expensive. There were things that were unavailable. There was backlogs and so on and so forth. And that was a hiccup. That wasn't much of an event out. I mean, in terms of the supply chain, it wasn't a massive, supply chain failure. It was more so just things got a little more difficult for a while.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of like, we've talked about this before as well, where when you start considering those things that impact your lifestyle wherever you live in the world, and if you really dive into the financial behind it, the supply chains, what's going on global, macroeconomically, global, geopolitically, again, do you want to be scared of everything and, like, oh my God, the sky is falling? There was a time in my life I felt that way. I don't anymore. That said, I was, looking at some of that stuff and evaluating it. It motivated me to make a decision to come here for a lot of the reasons you just described, because the environment is more conducive for not being stressed about all this other stuff that's happening that would have a much more material impact if I was still in the West, in the United States. If something like that happened, it would be much more stressful, much more difficult, much more challenging, and it's not changing anytime soon. It's only like this isn't like these things aren't getting easier. They're not getting solved. They're not in reality making the decision to exit that system or to at least move any easier. It's getting harder and harder to do that. And just like the US federal deficit, the household debt is increasing similarly. So it's as an individual in that system, it's getting harder to make the choice. Even if you want to, sometimes you can't. A lot of people, because of the debt burden they have, they can't. Right. They can't really choose to. So it's not getting easier as inflation or deflation. I mean, we say inflation, but deflation might actually be worse. It might be a worse thing to deal with, and those things are out of our control. The things we can control is decide where do we want, what do we value? How do we want to spend our time? What do we want to teach our kids? Where do we want to live? How do we want to, what environment, what culture do we want to live in? And, those are the things we can choose, at least right now. And then if you look at some of the World Economic Forum and these agendas that they have out, the policies that they're influencing aren't making decisions like that any easier either. In the restriction of movement, right? Like, yeah, and maybe COVID was a preview. Maybe there are, things in the pipeline that are going to make that even harder. We saw what that looked like and how that impacted travel and your either ability to or desire to.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely parts of the world, the U.S. being one of them, where it's kind of in your interest to pay attention a little bit to the news and kind of to like what's going on. It's been such a joy for me over the last 10 years to not do any of that.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to pay attention to any of that if I don't want to, because it doesn't have a material impact on anything that's going on around me. It impacts other people's lives. It impacts other places.
Yep.
It could have, in some sort of very roundabout way, some impact here at some point in some way. But in general, U.S. politics and whatever's going on and whatever everyone's so upset about and whatever the 6 o'clock news is trying to scare you with and all that stuff. Like I don't pay attention at all to any of it, which is lovely. Like it's really nice. It's kind of like it's just hard to live in those places and not be on the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Because a lot of your costs, the things that you have to pay for every month, they're just built into the system. So it's like you have to come up with your healthcare costs. You have to come up, your insurance. You have to come up with your car insurance, for example. It's mandatory and expensive. You've got to come up if you're a homeowner.
Property
You've got to
taxes,
come up with your property tax every year.
And homeowners insurance.
And your homeowner's insurance. And if you run a business, you have all sorts of extra obligatory overhead, mandatory overhead, and so on and so forth. So, you're living in these places. It's not easy to get off that track. Right. And say like, okay, actually, I want to grow some food and spend time with my kids and be a little more self-sufficient and then again you've got winter to deal with also. So it's a very again these are places I love. These are places I grew up. They're beautiful. There's beautiful people. There's there's this energy in the States that I really appreciate. They're places I love, but if they're not super conducive to that kind of stuff.
Right. They're not conducive for living in the present.
Right.
Because you're always trying to get ahead for the future. You're on the wheel, like, because most people, even if they don't understand like the nuts and bolts or the details, they inherently feel it. That's why they're still there. That's why they're still on that wheel doing that. So they understand, the pressure to keep going, to keep, so and that takes their time, right? That takes their time. So then they're spending less time doing the things they really want to do. They're spending less time with their kids. They're because this is what success looks like. This is how I get ahead for my family. They're doing what they think they need to do for their families, for their lives, for themselves. And unfortunately, it's conducive to not living in the moment, to not being present. And the culture here and the lifestyle here with all the things considered, it allows you to be more present, to live in the moment today. Yes, we still have to plan and be prudent or what's the word? Fiscally responsible. It's not prudent. Is that prudent?
Yeah, prudent's good, yeah.
Yeah. But where the luxury of that is you have more time to do things. Like you can spend time with your kids. You can go to their soccer practice. You can go, draw pictures or color. Like I saw you were coloring pictures of archangels with Soli. Like you can do that stuff. You can go to the river. You can. Not that people don't do that with their kids in the States. That's not my point. But you have a greater opportunity to do that here more often.
For sure, and there's like more production involved with doing those things back home. It's more planning that goes into it and more preparation, and it's usually further away, and it's got to be planned out in advance because everyone's schedules are so tight, and it's just kind of all that stuff. And we did earlier in the show, but we didn't even mention the role that debt plays in all of that, where everyone also is trying to cover their monthly nut. That includes, debt payments, whether it's car or house or personal or, a credit card, etc. All right, let's jump into Diana. I wanted to say Diana, which is how you'd say it here, but Diana, I think it was Mayfield, who is a frequent viewer and commenter on our channel. Thank you, Diana, for tuning in.
Thanks for watching.
I had a bunch of great questions here, which Brandon asked me to answer on YouTube, which I have not gotten to yet. I know. So I apologize both to you and to you, Diana, for not having gotten to this yet. But even better, we're going to do you one better and talk about it live on the pod. And so this is a multi-part real estate question. For those that don't know, we do run a real estate company here in the Loja Vilcabamba area. We've been in business since January of 2014, so we have quite a bit of experience here dealing with the ins and outs, do's and don'ts of real estate in Ecuador. So Diana asks, are there seller's disclosure documents? Absolutely not. All your due diligence here is on you. So, us as a company, of course, we have a process to protect people's interests and to make sure that the due diligence is done well. That being said, in general, in the country, there are not a lot of processes in place for a lot of that stuff, and it is on you to oversee your affairs and make sure that the things you're interested in as far as due diligence are done. So no, there are not disclosure documents. Are surveys, professional inspections, and clear title searches a part of the buying process? So there's no inspection process here in Ecuador. You're certainly welcome to hire someone to take a look at a house you're buying yourself, and we offer that to clients who are interested in it through builders that we work with. But no, there are no sort of what they would call an engineer who back home who does an inspection that's normally required by the bank. They don't do that. So surveys, yes. They're not a standard part of the closing process. However, properties here are surveyed. So you do have an official survey for most properties. Now, in this region, you can no longer, as of several years ago, property title can't even change hands unless it has a proper survey with the meets and bounds, the coordinates, etc. There are still other cantons where that would not be the case, but certainly, civil engineers are common here, and surveys are common and part of attached to almost every title, and in our region, every title. Okay, our clear title search is part of the buying process. So, they should be. In our region, certainly they're mandatory. Probably in most regions, they're mandatory. But the title search here is relatively simple. It's just getting certificates from the property register that show you everything about the property. And they can uncover different things or not, and then it's up to you sort of what you do with that information. Anything that we're listing, we will have done some basic due diligence when we took on the listing, and then once there's an accepted offer, then the second aspect of due diligence kicks in, which of course includes all of this stuff. As a former retired U.S. realtor, there's no way I'll ever buy property anywhere without those contingencies. I would say Ecuador is not going to be for you in that case, because yes, some of those things just don't exist, like a mandatory inspector and all that stuff. But you certainly can get through the due diligence process here well. You just have to understand the differences. Who writes the contract? So again, contract's a little different here as well. So in many sales, there is no contract because the closing process here is very quick. So often there's a deposit given. The deposit is secured in a number of different ways. I'm not going to get into all of that now. And then you go right to closing. So there is a minuta drawn up, which is just means draft in English, but it's what becomes the title later. So there is a document that's drawn up by the buyer, in this case normally by the buyer's attorney, or if the buyer chooses an attorney that works for the notary, draws up the minuta, which again is the basis of the what becomes the title once the property register issues the new title. Now, you can certainly have contracts here, both private and public contracts. Private contracts act as evidence, however, they are not fully legally binding. Public contracts that are notarized at the notary are 100% legally binding here. Normally, in real estate, a contract, what we'd refer to as a contract, is a promesa de compraventa, which is a is a contract or a purchase and sale agreement. It's a very official document that outlines all of the terms of the deal, penalties, timelines, etc., and anything else you want to put in it. That has a significant cost associated with it, basically a tax that the notary is obligated to charge. And so lots of people don't do that because it's not needed. However, if there is terms involved, then that becomes very important. So yes, no, we don't write contracts. An attorney draws up the contract. I understand your position of finding the necessity for dual agency, but it sometimes it's sometimes a really tricky place to find oneself. I assume there is no governing association like the NAR in Ecuador to regulate practices. Technically, there is. There's ACBIR, I believe is how you say that, which is the sort of the licensing and oversight. You know, I don't know, branch is the wrong word, but association perhaps is the right word. Basically, it's an association of realtors that is has their permission, has their they get their operating status from the government. Obviously, a better way to say that's escaping me. And their job is to give licenses. They're the ones that the real estate license comes from, which involves a course that you take. And they are technically in charge of some oversight. However, this is Ecuador, so I don't know that there's actually any oversight of any kind that's going on from that organization. So, yes, do you have a legally binding buyer agreement? I'm not even sure what you're referring to. I think maybe you mean once a deal is struck. Yeah, I'm actually not sure. If you want to clarify that, I can answer it in the future. Why do I find the same listings on different realty company websites? That's a long question to answer. It would involve like the history of real estate here, but some companies don't work with exclusive contracts. So there isn't really a well-functioning MLS system in Ecuador. And many companies, I mean, as of not very many years ago, very few companies worked with exclusive contracts. There's more now. We tend to work exclusively, but you definitely will find things listed in multiple places just because sometimes people will give it to all the sort of realtors in their area type of thing. Okay, I think that is pretty much it. So I hope that helps, Diana. If you have any more stuff you want to throw at us, happy to answer it.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in in terms of the same listing on multiple different websites. One thing that I found out throughout the years is there are properties that there are some agencies, let's say, that will list properties. The property will sell, and they'll still be listed on their website for years. So sometimes the same property comes back on the market, and it's still like listed, an old listing with another real estate company. And I've noticed that with actually quite a few realtors. People will contact me saying, "Hey, could I see this, and this property?" And then I'll contact this agency, and they'll say, "No, this is already sold. That's already sold." So it's a little bit strange, but a lot of properties listed on the internet are no longer available. Of course, we don't do that. As soon as the property sells, we remove it from all of the social media pages and our website, etc. And then the other thing is sometimes we'll even get an exclusive agreement to list a property that was previously listed with another agency, and the other agency never removed it, and they sometimes don't plan on doing so. So that can be also a little complicated because we'll have an exclusive agreement, but then we have to actually reach out to somebody else and say, "Please, could you remove this listing?" And we have an exclusive agreement for it. So we've had that situation happen a handful of times as well.
Yeah, and just, I think, I don't know, I just, some commentary, right? So this is a very different environment than the US, which again is like why I live here. For partly it's why I live here, because it is a different environment. One of the, so with taking a great risk here and exposing some of my political views, I'm I'm someone who really values freedom, right? Like I'm somebody who really believes in free market, believes in freedom in general. I was a big fan of some of Ayn Rand's work, and going back years when I sort of discovered some of that stuff. I thought The Fountainhead was really a great book, I thought. And so I'm a big believer in sort of the market, which really could just be stated differently as people interacting with each other, and then there being reactions, right? It's not that different than whatever that science term is. For every action there's a equal or something reaction. That's just the marketplace. Like that's just life. And then there's a great quote that maybe one of you know who said it. Something like, it's something like for good people you don't need laws, and criminals don't follow them anyway, right? There's some very ancient quote that's said better than I just said it. But I think all these things apply also to business, right? So if you can't regulate morality into existence, right? You can't put enough rules in place. I mean, you could put enough rules in place where you force people to operate a certain way and put them in jail basically if they don't. Like you could maybe
Right.
do
Well,
that.
that's kind of ironic, right? Like you're going to force morality with immorality.
Exactly.
You know.
Exactly. So, places like the U.S., markets like the U.S., in any business, like in any sector of the economy and anything that you're doing, and in your personal life, right? These are very regulated places. These are very controlled, very regulated places. You need government permission for everything. You've got to go through all sorts of processes to be able to interact in the marketplace, to be able to function economically. And that works or doesn't work to whatever degree it does. And some people might prefer that, right? Some people really might prefer a system or a place where they know that the bus they're getting on has gone through 54 safety checks and inspections, and they've had to, they've got all these rules and regulations in place about what you have to do to own and operate a bus company, and all the things that that would have to happen for that bus to pick you up, and the street is going to be a certain everything, and the sidewalk's going to be a certain everything, and there's rules for entrances, and there's rules for absolutely everything. You may prefer that. Or not, right? Or you'd rather be in a place where it's a little bit more of a free-for-all. Like it's a little bit more of just humans interacting with one another and working stuff out however that kind of happens, and just the freedom sort of to do so, right? So for business, I think when like online reviews came about, like that was awesome. Because it's such a direct marketplace reaction to people's experiences, right? So if you have an awesome business that's treating people great and are good at what they do, they have great reviews. You have a business that's crappy and it's not serving people well, and maybe they're rude to their customers and whatever else. You can go online and see what people think, right? This is a sort of great example of the marketplace reacting to what's taking place, and people being able to see that very easily. So yeah, this is a place where there's way less rules and regulations and oversight, like way less than back home. It's much freer. You're much more free to operate. It's much more about the human experience, the human interaction, which means to run a business, it's ultimate self-responsibility, right? Like we had to create our own systems, rules, and protocols to protect the interests of our clients in order to maintain our reputation, and well, also just to feel good about ourselves, of course, as well, but just to maintain our reputation and be able to serve people in a way that works, so that we have a good reputation and people want to work with us, and we get to bring people into this community and watch them thrive and live their lives, and be part of that. If we weren't doing that, the market would react to that. If we were screwing things up all the time and not didn't have good processes in place for our oversight and due diligence and all these things, the marketplace would find that out, and that would be reflected in all kinds of places, including our reviews, and people would stop working with us. And I personally love that about this place, because you got to ask around. Like you got to, like, when I'm looking for something, I got to like go through my network and find out who's the recommended people, and go about it that way, versus sort of this attitude back home of like, it's all just sort of safe, right? It's just whatever you're doing, it's okay because there's somebody in place who's looking out for my interests, but there isn't really.
Right.
But it's like it has that sort of feeling a little bit on things, and you feel like, well, I can sue if someone, whatever, or and so it's, I don't know, it's a different culture, it's a different society, different place to live. But
And I think in this culture, particularly where we are in a small town where everybody knows everybody, like you started the company 2014, a decade of serving people. So in a small town like this, you're screwing people or not serving people well, you're not in business for a decade. It's not like big metropolis where half the place doesn't even know who you are. Like everybody knows. So that's one thing. There's a couple points I want to, you brought up that were really interesting to me. So when you think of, when you were talking about the West and all the regulation and the safety and the controls, and you're talking about buses, it reminded me of this topic that I've been seeing online in social media about the airplanes, about Boeing. And we've had, I think Richard, I think it was you that talked about the Boeings in there. But he explained like some of the issues with particular types of Boeing aircraft. And I've been seeing all this stuff about all these little issues with Boeing jets and Boeing, so, and this isn't coming from an environment that has all kinds of regulation and, the controls on the parts for these aircraft are, if they're a quarter of a millimeter, micrometer out of whack, they don't even use them. And so it's super regulated, super controlled, and you're seeing all these issues there in that environment. So it's not even like the controls protect, can solve for everything, right? And then the other thing that was interesting is, when you're there, when you're in the United States and you have it's almost like you have this fear that makes you think like, no, to not be accountable for your actions because the government's going to protect me, or this agency's looking out for me, or this control's in place. I'm a little scared, but I don't have to be because these people over there, they've got it. They've got me covered, right? And the interesting thing here is, you have an environment that's conducive to, like, all right, you come here, if you're naive, because there are less controls and regulations, if you're naive and you're going to get taken advantage of, right? However, if you do, if you take the time to establish the relationships, which that's the point of a community. That's what's awesome about a community coming together. And that's what you see in this particular community when there are hardships or there are things that happen, the community comes together. Well, that's not because they don't know each other. It's because the relationships are already there. So you have this, we've talked about this before. Faith and fear have the same definition, believing in something you cannot see. In the United States, it's you almost are tilted a little more to fear, and here you can tilt to faith because if you've done the work and created the relationships, and if you really have immersed yourself into the community and become part of that, and if that's, and that's why part of the reason I'm here is because it's real, it's tangible here. So if you do that, you build the relationships, you're part of the community, you can have faith. It's easier to tip to faith that, hey, I don't need someone else to, because I know I'm going to handle my stuff. And if something that I cannot handle, I know there's people there. And it's kind of ironic, but it's more of a real way. It's not like this invisible organization, this regulation that's going to save me. It's people I know that I'm going to help, that they know I'm going to help them, and that I know they're going to help me. I don't know.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
That's part of the culture. I mean, that's what's so beautiful about it, and that's where the safety lies.
Right.
Like the safety lies in that network. It lies in that community, like in the people, because the people are accustomed to not having that outside force that's dictating everything.
Right.
So then the marketplace is allowed to just function. People are allowed to just live their lives and interact with one another, and that works.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I gotta go and do interview.
Yeah.
Pedro.
Nice. You're interviewing Pedro.
I'm interviewing Pedro today.
Nice. All right.
So that'll be fun. We'll put that out probably the day after this comes out, I believe. Should be Sunday when you guys watch this on Saturday.
Chévere.
So, thank you everyone for tuning in. Again, hit the like button if you enjoy our crazy ramblings. And subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell. Check out our Vilcabamba Lifestyle Retreat. Link in the description below.
We hope to see you here one day.
So until then,
We'll see you next time. Take care, guys.
ciao, guys.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel right here. Check out our real estate channel right here. For content that you will absolutely love, click right here. And if you want to know how we got here, click here.